All right, so this I've been wanting to do this for a little while. The Zelda 2 items and spell tier list maker by Eunos. But part of the thing is just putting them in order doesn't really seem like fun if you don't kind of discuss it. So rather than that, I'm going to actually put them in order and kind of talk about them. I just took a couple of little notes, but basically this is going to be off the cuff. Um, it's probably going to end up being rambly because I really haven't made any notes. A few things that I want to like discuss about each thing is um, like the importance, usage, the helpfulness, like whether it's a blocking item or a blocking spell, how hard is it to get, and other things as well. Those were like the basic notes that I just took. I just wanted to sort of like have a few things just to sort of base this on. And I didn't put this in order, but I'm just going to go in order of these because I don't want to like again, I want it to be off the cuff. I didn't want to put these things in a certain order and then do them in a certain order. So it will be. I thought about doing it in order of like kind of what you get it, but you can get certain items before other items. So then it gets more complicated to do it that way. So this is the way I'm going to do it. So the first one that I'm going to do is boots. So boots are um, I guess the best way to do it would be to put it where I think it is and then explain it. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say boots are right now at this moment, I'm leaning towards B tier. The reason why I put it in B tier is I feel like a few things. First of all, um, boots are in the fourth palace. There's a required spell for that palace. So there's like a thing you need to progress, plus a thing you need to beat the palace. The boots allow you to escape the palace fast, but the biggest problem that I have with the boots, as much as I love them, they're extremely underused. The boots are only really used to fast track out of Palace 4 and to get to Palace 5. Yes, they're a major progression item, but almost all of these items to some degree are progression items. Not all of them, but most of them are. Um, and so I love the idea of the boots. I like the implementation of them. Not the implementation of them. I love the idea of the boots, but the implementation of them is really not very creative and not very well designed from once you get past the actual like what they are and what they do. And it allows you to get a heart. So it allows you to go to Palace 5 and allows you to get the heart that's above Palace 5 and allows you to go escape reverse shortcut out of P4. But really, that's it. Excuse me. So there's like a lot of places where I feel like they could have like added like aspects of backtracking with the boots and made the backtracking with boots like unique. They could have added other places where boots could have been used. Um, to some degree, I understand why they don't do those things. Um, because you're once you beat that palace, you're moving on to the next progression item, and once you beat that palace, you're going. So you don't want it. There's definitely a distinct aspect of the next item is sort of like the next item you use. So the game has like a structure to it, but I still feel like they could have done more with it. And that's why I give it a B tier. That one is like, love the concept, just wish it was used a little bit more in the game. Um, and that's kind of, I wouldn't have given it an S tier unless it was like really well designed and really well used. used. So it probably would have been an A tier if they had used it a little bit more. The next item is candle, and that is pretty much S tier for a lot of reasons. First of all, well, first thing is that when you've played the game many times, you can technically when you play the game many times, you absolutely can beat the game without candle. It's very hard, but you can beat the game without candle. Um, but that's not something you're going to do on a first playthrough or a second playthrough or a third playthrough. You're always going to need the candle. Um, and while once you get the candle, basically all the caves are now you can see in the caves. You pretty much need it's like a massive progression item that you basically need to pretty much do most things. Like you may get through the cave that requires jump, and then that would progress you to Death Mountain or P2. But you're not going to do P2. You're not going to do Death Mountain without Candle on your first playthrough. Like that's just like you're not, and many playthroughs after that. So its importance is like it's super critical, and it lights the caves. I would say the only thing that I'm not a fan of is that they push you through a cave that is dark. I think the game could have easily pushed you to the item, which is in the first palace. It could have easily pushed you over like a bridge or like a forced encounter, like that bubble encounter that goes to the heart. They could have not put a cave there and have you go over something that isn't a cave, because like when you first play the game's sort of a bit of a misdirection because you're like, I don't want to go through any dark caves, right? And one of the townspeople tells you not to go a certain way without candle, and it's like, so but like all of the caves are dark, and like to get the jump you have to go through trophy cave. You have to go into to get the trophy, and that cave has lava, and it's just like that would be my only gripe with it. But other than that, it's S tier, and just because it's so needed it's so useful and so needed for a first time, second time, third time, fourth time playthrough. Um, it would have been neat if it worked more like Legend of Zelda, where you had like a fire, like where you had fire, and it was like you could light up a cave, and then you got another item that would give you like something that always lit the caves up, even though that's like a direct pull from Legend of Zelda. I do think that could have been even more neat, where like it would cost you magic. But that's just another thing and another thing and another thing. At the end of the day, it's S tier. Cross is C tier. Cross is absolutely not needed to beat the game. You can totally pass it and still beat the game and still beat Valley of Death on a first playthrough without it, um, because of spells. Would it is it easy? No, but you definitely can beat the game on a first playthrough without cross. Um, because of spell and because of fairy spell. At that point, you would need like if you're doing a first time playthrough, you would need full magic, and you would need those two spells. Um, but again, the concept, like the boots, is great. The implementation is not as good. It's a late item. Um, it's a late item. It's behind a boss, so it's very hard to get. It's in a very like big palace. It only really pertains to one enemy. It would have been really cool if it like you needed it for multiple enemies to make it even more important to get. But it doesn't block you from beating the game, and you can technically even I really believe you can beat the game without it on a first playthrough. Um, excuse me. Boots is like a required. That's why Boots is a tier up because Boots is like absolutely required to beat the game. Um, so that would be Cross. Downstab without a doubt S tier. It is OP as hell. It creates new tech. It creates new ways of battling enemies. It allows you to avoid enemies. It allows you to avoid taking damage. It allows you to kill enemies faster. Like I don't need to talk about it in length. It is awesome. It is S tier. Um, uh, and also like not a requirement as you can technically beat GP without downstab, and you can technically, yeah. So like it's technically, but then you can't beat it without really like super knowledge of the game. You can't like you're not gonna beat it without you're not gonna beat the game without downstab on like the first couple of playthroughs. So it is like a requirement. It's way more required than the cross, in my opinion. Fairy is S tier. Fairy is a spell that blocks areas off. It's a spell that's required for multiple for Palace. Sorry, for getting to Palace 3, it's required. To get into Palace 5, it's required, and to get and to beat Palace 6, it's required. It's multiple requirements. Uh, it is an expensive spell because it can also cheat doors. Um, if you're a speedrunner, you can avoid using it in P4. Sorry, P5. Sorry, but we're talking about like the importance of it, and at the end of the day, um, its cost is also managed very well with when you get it. It can cheat, like I said, it can cheat doors. And so fairy can go through doors, meaning that you can like cheat palaces a little bit. Like you don't need to get keys to get through certain areas. And it's a pretty early spell, which is pretty significant. The fact that Nintendo were open enough to like give you a spell that sort of like allows you to break the game a little bit from like what they were really their design intentions were it within the palaces and having keys. It's S tier. Fire. B tier. Fire is not required. Fire is a pain in the ass to get in the town, and it's not required. It's not the cheapest spell if you're getting there with low magic. It is required to kill certain enemies, and on a first playthrough, if you need to grind that area with the Tektites and everything with fire, being able to bust back into Firetown, and like that's where I leveled when I played the game the first time. I was like, oh, I want to get some levels here, so I grinded a bit, grinded the Tektites, was able to go in town, heal myself, use the fire spell, get magic again. Tektites are worth a decent amount. I got a couple of levels and then moved on. So it has like, and I really like it in terms of base strats. I like the idea, even though it's not as useful. I really feel like maybe it could have been useful for some bigger enemies. It's really only useful for smaller enemies mostly, or enemies that require fire. I do think that the overall, like, you can use it for, like, it's a very castable spell. At a certain magic level, it becomes a very castable spell, which allows players on a first, second, third time playthrough to actually use it in really cool ways, to beat an enemy or to do something, to well, obviously to beat an enemy. Um, and I love the idea of it. So yeah, that's that. Glove, S tier. Glove is like probably my favorite item. Um, it's a progression item. It is a structural item that can create new different structures within the gameplay. So if you have a 3 tile block, you can hit the top block of the 3 tile block and make it a 2 tile block to make you be able to jump over it easier. There's like structures that are built around breakable blocks. There's downstab. There's blocks that you have to use glove and downstab on to break through. There's items hidden behind breakable blocks. There's falling blocks that used and you have to get through with the glove. Um, just a really cool item, and you could argue it's a little underused in Zelda 2. It's a little underused, but I feel like it's used very appropriately and very distinctly. So like they use it so you can't like cast fairy and cheat a hard room. So they make the breakable blocks in there, so you have to use glove, and you can't use fairy to get through like a hard room. So they put breakable blocks in there, so it's like really well managed, and it's an awesome um, a tool, awesome item. Hammer. This is A. I'm gonna put it in A, but I might change it to S. Here's the thing. It's a mad progression item. It's like where the game is like when you're playing it, the game is already really hard when you've never played it before. And you're like, damn, this fucking game is really hard. And then you get to Death Mountain, and it's like how hard they make it to get this item, and it's a massive progression item. Um, it is what gets you fairy. It is what gets you. Well, technically, you can get down stab um, without hammer. Like you could go through Death Mountain, go out Death Mountain, and go, but then you still need medicine to get, and medicine is behind a boulder, which you need the hammer. So you can't get fairy until you get hammer. Which is one of the things that I really love is that they kind of allow you to get down stab semi early. If you make a bad mistake and you don't go through to get the hammer and you go the other way, you can still get down stab and you can still get back that way. So it's I think it's well designed, and like Death Mountain is like one of the funnest things to do once you get good at the game. It's one of the funnest areas to do. But on a first time playthrough, it is like you're already playing like an 8 out of 10 hard game, arguably a 9 out of 10 hard game, and then it's like the game is like at its hardest in my opinion outside of Valley of Death potentially for a first time playthrough and GP. Literally I feel like everything else is like sort of like Palace 1, like about as hard as Palace 1, but maybe a little bit bigger or longer. So Hammer in my opinion is, it's hard to give it S tier because how much can you use it and how many blocks can you put, and how, like, what's the point once you have it and you get out of the first area? Like, what's the point of having breakable blocks? So it's kind of one of those items that's really really important, and really hard to get and super satisfying when you get it, and opens up a lot of little play opens up a bunch of things right as you get it, and then it's like that's it, it's kind of like done after that. So it's really hard for me to put it as S tier. Flute, B tier. Flute is like one of those things that I feel like it just like it feels so underwhelming. You needed to get past River Devil, and you needed to open up for Palace 6, the Third Eye Rock. And that is a really cool design element, very tricky. Um, but it's temporarily stops overworld encounters on the overworld, but it also stops you. So it's not, it's like when I see people doing a first time playthrough, I don't see them use it for that. And I don't, like, no one uses it for that. It's super underwhelming, but it's a major progression item that you need. And it's, you have to have it to beat the game. It's like, it's up and down. It's up and down, up and down. But like for me, I feel like I wish it could have done something like taking you to other parts on the map when you blow it. Something even that little could have been cool because it could have acted as like a fast travel type of item. But then it would have been better to have it as an earlier item so you could fast travel once you want, like to have it in like P4. So then you've been to like every map technically. So then you could go to every map with it and it could be like fast travel. That could have been like really cool. It's just like there's very little implementation of it. It's really underwhelming. But it has two major things that you need to use it for to progress. So it has like a very high significance to it. Um, but I can't really get over it being more than a B tier. Jump, A tier. Jump to me is problematic in that you need it to progress. But the reason why I say it's problematic is that it's once it becomes cheap, it's a really, really way of like avoiding combat. And combat is one of those things that I really love in this game. But then I can't really like crap on it for that because I think it's like managed very well in terms of your magic. So you're less likely to cast it until you get a little bit higher up in magic. And I feel like it's it doesn't get used that much in like really like first, second, third playthroughs, but it's super useful and it's like it's almost like a defense spell, which I love. But then it also I love the combat, so it's one of those weird spells that I like really love, but it also like one of the things that I love the most, the thing that I love the most about this game is the combat. And so, as it is like a kind of enemy avoidance sort of spell, and it tends to not being used as much on first, second, third playthroughs, I can't put it in the S tier for sure, and I kind of refuse to put it as a B tier. And it's a required spell. Life spell. This might be a bit of a. You might be wondering what? Like, how can life spell be B tier? To be honest, I almost consider putting it in C tier. The reality is, I feel like, first of all, how you get it, where there's a mirror and you have to find it underneath a table by slashing, makes no sense. Like, people definitely beat this game back in the day or even today without life spell. So you can technically, for obvious reasons, because you get shield spell, Shield spell can carry you through the game. It's a cheap spell to begin with. Actually, I don't want to get into that because I'm going to put tier on that. But life spell is, first of all, a really hard spell to find, a really hard spell to figure out. You don't need it to beat the game. You can beat the game without it. It's expensive. You have healer people and magic people. You have healer ladies in like every town. You have fairies in a lot of places. Just, I think it because of the because you have to retravel to areas, life spell keeps the game going, which is a lot of that gives it a lot of value, which is hard for me to then not put it in the A tier because it's the type of spell that will keep you playing in a dungeon, because if you game over in a dungeon, you have to start at the very beginning of the game. So as a progression spell, it works in that way, but it's not, I do not think it's critical. As a whole, I think it does really, it's one of those things where like you end up wanting to cast life all the time instead of shield, where I think shield is way more valuable for first, second, third time playthroughs and stuff like that. Um, it's really hard. Like in one way, in one essence, it can go to an A tier to some degree because of the raw ability for it to keep you in the game. So if you're somewhere and you have the ability to cast or the ability to grind a jar and then cast, you can keep playing. So that kind of makes it A tier. But then you can beat the game without it. It's really hard to get. It's like you that kind of I want to put it in C tier. So like I think B tier is where it should be. Magic Key. Magic Key is definitely C tier. Magic Key, again, cool idea. Really cool idea. But not required. You can ferry through doors. Not required. So it's very underwhelming. But at that point, does the player know that he can ferry through doors? I don't know. The person has to be really trying different things. And then it is kind of a sticking point that you need. And it's a bit of a pain to get because you need to know that you have to cast spell to get it. And you need a certain amount of magic to get it. I would have liked them to do more things like where it was like a requirement. Magic Key was a requirement. Do I kind of understand why they didn't do it? Yeah, but I also feel like it would have been nice to make it a requirement. This one, it makes me very sad. This might be my only D tier. Literally one use. It's a progression item. You have to go through a lot and you have to get to P3. You have to do a lot of things to get to that point to get Raph to move forward. But it literally does one thing. It just gets you to another continent. Like, it just gets you to East Hyrule. And it's like, okay. Like, I would have loved them to have multiple Raph points, or I don't even know what they could have done. In its nature, it really is just it's D tier. Sorry, like hard to put there. I mean, based on it just being like a truly required item to beat the game, I could probably move it to C tier, but I couldn't go any higher than that. Reflect. That one's tough. Reflect, I'm going to put in A tier right now, but I might change my mind. Reflected is a requirement to beat a boss, so it's a requirement to beat a game. Um, it does a lot of fancy things. It becomes pretty decently cheap at high magic levels. So, which makes it really nice. It blocks fire, it blocks axes, it makes Link's hitbox smaller, so fireballs like around him, like for Thunderbird, it makes Thunderbird's fight way easier. It's just it's a very powerful spell. Um, but some of the uses that it would have really had early game, you don't get until Palace 4. You literally don't get it until you've beaten 3 palaces, and it would have been like massively helpful in Death Mountain. It would have been very helpful in a lot of other places that you've already beaten. So that's why I kind of don't give it the S tier. Shield, S tier. The absolute best spell for a person that's playing it for the first, second, third time. Super valuable. Sometimes I see people play this game and they don't use it. And it's like, it's so painful because they're dying when they really don't need to die. Or they're trying their best to cast life spell. So they're grinding a jar and then dying because they're trying to grind a jar for a small blue jars. Instead of just casting shield when they have like half health, they're trying to like get like close to full health and like not cast shield, and like shield they could have gotten like 2 or 3 shield casts out of it, or like dying with magic and not having life spell and dying with magic when you could have just kept casting shield. It's such a valuable, and when people do use it in like first, second, third playthroughs, it usually is so much smoother and a way better experience. Just a super awesome spell. Even like used in speed runs, just a great spell. Um, spell. I have to put spell with the cross, or I have to put it one higher. It is not a required spell. It does trap the magic key, but the magic key isn't a required spell, as I already said, because you can fairy through doors. But it turns items into bots. And if you don't have the cross, then you would, if you beaten the game without the cross on a first, second, third, whatever playthrough, you probably needed spell to get through VOD. You either need the cross or you need spell. So it's got to go in that plane. It can't go lower, and it's not a block on the game beating the game. Like, it's technically not going to, like, you can beat the game without it. I do like it. I like it a lot. I wish it was implemented. I wish it turned more, and excuse me, I wish it turned like it turns enemies into bots, like lots of enemies into bots, but I kind of wish it did like even more. Um I would value it technically, I would value it more than cross, but only slightly. But then again, on a first playthrough, you might want to see the enemies rather than turning them into bots. So it's very hard. That one's very hard, but I'm going to keep it at C tier. Thunder. This one is very hard. It's a requirement to beat the game. It is cost a boatload of magic. Does damage to a lot of enemies. Can kill enemies outright. I actually wish it would kill more enemies because of how much it costs. I wish it would kill like every enemy on the screen. I wish it had even A tier. A tier. I wish they had gone even farther with it if it's going to cost that much, where it'd be more useful in certain occasions. I really feel like it's something that should blow up a fucker. I call them fuckers, but fucker or whatever the hell it's called. Those ninja dudes in GP. It should just kill them outright. Like if you're gonna utilize and cast that much magic, it should just blow the crap out of like every enemy. So it's like, but it costs a crap ton, and that's okay. But I feel like it could have had a little bit, but it is a powerful item and it does kill certain enemies outright. It is super cool idea. Could have been more fleshed out. Um, Up thrust is A tier. You can beat the game without up thrust. Um, but it's really handy in certain places. Technically, you can't beat the game without up thrust because there's a key. Only in speed running you can beat it without up thrust. In a first, second, third time playthrough, you would need upstab to get that key that's in Palace 4. So it kind of is technically a required um, sword tech. Scott, I was thinking about speed running a little bit more than anything else there. So yeah, even that makes it even more like A or S tier because it's kind of a required sword tech. It's super useful for breaking blocks above your head. It's super useful for the enemies like the Moes in wherever all Moes that are in the game, those little flying eyeballs. It's super useful for the ninjas in GP. So I it's even like kind of sad that it technically it does come pretty early, like it comes like mid game, which is nice, but it could have even come a little bit earlier and that would have been nice as well. Uh, Although East Hyrule and the Maze Island are really where you use it, but I do feel like because of that, it would have been nice to give it earlier too. So it could have been given a little earlier, but I wouldn't pick on that for it being an A tier or an S tier. Um, I could almost move it on a first time playthrough. I could almost move it to an S tier, but I feel like a lot of people when they're playing this game, they forget about it. They forget they have it. Let alone they actually find it. It's a hard find. Um, but you need it, like I said, basically to progress. Again, you have fairy, so you could technically not get that key and ferry through that door and call it a day and not have to get upstab or not find upstab and then ferry through the door if you understand that you can ferry through doors. It's very tough, very tough. Bagu's note is um insane progression item. Um, it basically allows you to get to Death Mountain, which gives you the hammer that allows you to progress. It's a pain in the ass to get when you've never played the game. It's like a huge sticking point in the game. Um, you definitely, once you get it, you feel great that you got it. Small story. When I was playing this game, I didn't play this game until like I was like the first time I ever played this game was when I was like 31, 32. I didn't even play it when I was a kid. Um, I played the original, but I didn't play this one as a kid. Um, and I was playing it, I found it, and then um, while I was playing it, I had the Nintendo left on. I found it and moved on to Death Mountain and was dying in Death Mountain countlessly. And I hadn't saved. I had only when you continue, you don't save everything. So you won't go you revert back if the console like trips up, you have to go to your last save. And so that's what happened. My mom walked by the Nintendo and I guess walked a little too hard and it like reset the Nintendo. And then I had to like find Bagu's note again. And I couldn't find it. Like I forgot where it was because I was like, I was in Death Mountain. I had done all the stuff in like P2. Like I had gone to P2 because Death Mountain was kicking my ass. Like I'd done some other things or tried to do some other things. And then she walked by it, tripped it up, and I had to find it again. And I literally could not find it. I forgot where it was. I was like, I don't know where this note is. I don't know what the hell I'm doing. And I had to like go and find it online. I had to go on YouTube and look it up and find it online. I mean, the whole thing is comical. Like that, you need to get a note from this guy who's in the woods, and he's like, it's like that's like the Lost Woods in this game, but it's like just a bunch of like random encounters, and there's like a hint to it. The boss is like in the forest, above the river, whatever, north of the river. It's just like a very comical because you have to like talk to the bit, and the bit like is sleeping and then you wake the bit up. It's just like there's like a whole lot of like energy to it, but a lot of troll, and it like reminds me of those like top tier trolls that like Nintendo can do um in like a fully released game. They'll do something like that, which is just it's like hilarious. I almost, yeah. You know what? S tier, S tier, S tier. Um, just S tier, and that's my breakdown of um, the items, spells, um, in Zelda 2, the tier list maker made by Eunos. Um, my I hope I should, if I do put this on YouTube, I'm hoping to. That was my plan. I will put a link in the description to it. Maybe other people will do this as well. I don't know. But that's my kind of my breakdown. There's some in here, like I said, I could go here, I could go there. It's very hard for me to put the raft in the D tier. I don't really like. I like love this game. It's very hard for me to put something in there, but it literally has like one use, and it's like very hard for me to do that. And like it's this is like I thought it'd be interesting to go over it, but I also feel like it would be really weird to just put it in order and be like done. Because like I don't know, like I like the idea of like thinking about why I'm putting something somewhere. So I hope other people maybe do this after they see this, or there might be some that have already been done. I don't know on YouTube. I didn't really look it up, to be honest. But that's my breakdown. Hope you enjoyed it. Again, like I said, it's going to be a little rambly, but thanks for watching. If you made it this far, if you didn't, still thanks for giving it a look. Um, Thank you. Bye. Have a good day, good night, good morning, wherever you are. Take it easy.